It's a beautiful day out here at the K, guys. We were just admiring the wonderful weather. The year is 1990 something, and we're all going to have fun with these Zoom backgrounds. Just going to give everybody 1 minute. As we're getting started, I want to say thank you for taking the time to join us. This is a really exciting webinar for us to host today, and going to be honest, a little selfish. We're all kind of missing sports in some way. And if you're not missing sports, you're going to get a chance to learn how data is so ingrained into Major League sports. And today we're going to get a chance to focus on baseball with an expert from our hometown team, which we'll get a chance to introduce here in a second. My name is Ryan Weber. I'm President and CEO of the KC Tech Council. We are the regional advocate for Kansas City's tech industry. Funded by that industry. I know many of you here represent our member companies. Thank you for supporting the Tech Council. That support allows us to produce this great content for you. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I think at any level of business or professional roles you're in, many of us are collecting data, analyzing data, and specifically some of us have to make decisions on that data. And there's also some of you that have to articulate what the data is saying so that you can impact decisions of people above you or even your peers or in several different roles. And so that is also our goal today, is to look at this a little differently in how those that are involved with Major League Baseball are taking the data and also interpreting those results to players, coaches, front office folks, and other decision makers. And that's just a little tidbit of what you're in for here today as well. Now, just a little bit of formatting here for our Zoom webinar. So we do have a Q&A function available. And what I would say is that if you could please go ahead and throw your questions into the Q&A function here with Zoom. We'll make sure to track that as well. And then if there's one that's timely, I'll try to jump into the conversation. And then if not, we will make sure to get to those in a timely way. We've reserved some time at the end of this webinar to make sure that those questions get asked. A couple other things too before we get started. Folks, it's Joel Goldberg's birthday. And Joel, let's not go ahead and, we'll not announce your age. I don't know if that's a subject or not, but Facebook gave me the reminder today. And so now that we're live on Facebook and live on this webinar, Joel, from all of us, I just want to say happy birthday. Thanks for not only taking your time, but time on your birthday, which I've also had to celebrate a birthday in quarantine. It's a little unique. I don't think we're going to forget these, but thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, Joel, and kind of let you take it from there. And I'll quit talking and listen in as well. So folks, thanks again for joining us. And Joel, thank you for hosting this. We always appreciate you taking the time to help us at the Tech Council. You've done a great job of participating in several of our birthdays, several of our events. And you're a great interviewer. And even though you're not going to get splashed, which I know everyone knows you for that, I don't think I've been able to con one of your teenagers into throwing a bucket of water over you at the house. But maybe in the future, I'll get clever enough to do something like that. But thank you. Joel is a TV broadcaster with Fox Sports. Obviously, everyone gets a chance to see him representing the Royals, doing a great job covering games, and helped us connect to our featured guest today. So Joel, I'm going to let you take it from here. And thanks again for doing this with us.
Well, appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you. Good to be with everyone. And really cool to see the numbers. We're up to 60 right now. What a world that we're living in. We're also in a world where nowadays you look on most baseball staffs and you are going to see someone in a very high executive role, oftentimes with a PhD. That's not anything that we would have ever heard of in the old days. It's very common right now. Just like the rest of the world, the tech industry and business in general, things evolve. That'll be the case. And certainly it's going to look a little different too after this pandemic. But I'm really excited about this one because it's certainly a topic and a subject that I'm familiar with, at least in terms of baseball, but then there's another level of it in what Dr. Daniel Mack does. So great to be with all of you. Thanks for the birthday messages, by the way, too. The age thing doesn't bother me. If we really want to get a hint, the big 50 will come up in a couple of years. So 48 doesn't seem like really any different than yesterday at 47. Just a lot of hearing from people and phone calls and Facebook and all that, which is really good at this time. It's strange to be home or not at the ballpark during my birthday, which I actually share with one of the guys on our crew, Sam Abramson. We were born about 6 hours apart, so it's usually a joint celebration between the two of us. So anyway, as I introduced Daniel, and he can correct me on this, the number one question I get asked every day now, which used to be how expensive is your dry cleaning bill? It's now, when is baseball coming back? And it's not once a day, it's sometimes 50 times a day. I just got a text message from a major league umpire, I won't name his name, saying, what are you hearing? We don't know anything. The reality of it is some very high level people are in the same boat. Most of us don't have a lot. I'm probably not that high up the food chain, but the people that are that high up the food chain with the big titles, they still don't know. So I'll say, I'm thinking late June, early July is the vibe I'm getting. It's just a guess, and that's it. With that said, and he could certainly add his 2 cents, and it's not why we're here, but it is what everyone's asking about baseball. I want to introduce right now Dr. Daniel Mack, who is Assistant General Manager of Research and Development for the Kansas City Royals. And as I mentioned, that's not something that we would have seen in the past. It's very common nowadays to see that type of role in the front office. Daniel, how are you? How has your world changed in the midst of all of this?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. It's been pretty strange, right? I think when I saw you last, it was on the backfields in Surprise, and that seems like years ago now at this point. We've kind of become a slightly different operating organization, but a lot of the same principles, I think, are still kind of in play for us. There's a lot of Zoom calls. There's a lot of conversation with our minor league players. Obviously, Mike Matheny and his staff are constantly talking to those that were in Major League camp and our Major League players. And whether it's a conversation with Lonnie Goldberg, who oversees our draft, or Scott Sharp, who is involved in the Royals versions of a lot of those high-end meetings to figure out how we can return to play and return to work. We're still trying to make sure that we keep the information flowing as much as possible so that we can continue to educate ourselves. We can continue to improve in ways in which, while not happening on the field directly, which is what I would love to have right now, are things that I think are giving us an opportunity to continue to build competitive advantages, find edges wherever we can. My staff has been, working almost as if we were in the middle of the season right now, helping with every different aspect that we need to keep the minor leagues in a good spot and to keep our amateur knowledge in a good spot as well.
You said something that was interesting to me, and I want to follow up as it pertains to the Royals and to your department and all departments for that matter. What I'm hearing as I talk to executives around town, and that I do all the speaking and all that stuff on the side outside of baseball, and the organizations that are having the most success at a distance are the ones that are over communicating right now, that they are communicating at a higher level. It's interesting because Mike Matheny, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he told me the same thing. He said, we're having touch points with our players sometimes 5 times a week. And it really reminds me the way organizations outside of baseball are communicating on Zoom. You guys are in the same boat. So what is that communication and tying it all together been like?
Well, from our department's perspective, it's really kind of trying to set some milestones, some weekly milestones that we think we can continue to revisit, so that little projects that we're working on or large research projects that we want to work on are kind of being able to be followed up with, that we can have productive conversations that kind of in that over communication setting, like we're getting we have 2 full-time analysts. We have an intern working on amateur work with us. Our director of pro scouting moonlights in our department. And then we have 3 developers, and we're all on one call at least once a week so that we can all hear what we're doing, so that we're all still connected. In Kauffman Stadium, our offices aren't that far apart. So that flow happens organically when we're there. It's trying to bring as much of that to the conversations we're having. And then it's kind of taking that knowledge, taking that information, and propagating it through the organization. So whether or not it's a conversation with, our newly minted hitting department with Alex Zumwalt and Drew Saylor and Keone Durin, talking about new reports that we're helping them with, talking about players, what they were getting ready to work on, or giving presentations to minor league players, talking about Rapsodo data, talking about pitch types, talking about spin rates. I would say a lot of our work falls into basically three categories. There's continuing research, there's helping with us continuing to make good decisions as it relates to player acquisition and other forms of player help. And then there's almost like a continuing education aspect of kind of what we've picked up, where I've talked with folks, we've had analysts that have, like I said, talked with the players, just kind of keeping those three arenas in play, those three areas in play. And, then once again, kind of having our own sort of TikTok meeting structure so that we can kind of follow a rhythm, even when that rhythm is to be in your house a lot.
It's an interesting way of putting it too, in terms of the TikTok reference. But, we're all, I keep saying this with this pandemic, we are all living in this world together. We've never had anything like this before where it affects everyone. We've had plenty of disruption, about that, but now everyone is having to make this adjustment to working at home or some version of that. I want to back up a little bit to your background, because I think even when I got into, baseball years and years ago, and my background's broadcasting, I didn't play, but there weren't positions like yours. And nowadays, nobody would blink at, a guy with your education and your background doing this. It is common. It's exciting. It's a newer world. So you went to what is considered, by the way, one of the, or at least got your PhD at what is considered one of the great baseball schools in the nation. Vanderbilt. If you were to say right now the Royals have this young star from Vanderbilt, you'd say, okay, is he left-handed or right-handed? What does he pitch? There are some, right? I mean, that Nashville has become a hot spot in terms of baseball and Vanderbilt. You got your PhD there. You were studying computer science. I think the dissertation was on jet engine. What were your goals as a kid coming up and then going to college? Did you want to be in baseball, or how did this come about?
Well, I think, as a kid, I loved the game of baseball. I loved playing the game of baseball. In high school, it was pretty apparent that probably wasn't going to be my future. But luckily, I kind of kept being a fan, kept following it. I think like a lot of people my age sort of embraced fantasy baseball as a way to sort of keep in touch and understand the entire scope of the game. Players, in different regions, being able to understand where teams were getting good. That's also where I started to learn a lot more about the minor leagues. And then when I got to college, I really kind of kept all of my options open. But right around junior year is when some of my professors sort of took more of an interest in seeing if I was interested in research work and doing more work with their graduate students. And doing that sort of propelled me into understanding, okay, I'm learning in classes, but if I want to actually ask other questions, this might be the avenue where I can ask a question, find an answer, and help other people understand what answer I found. That kind of propelled me into doing graduate work. I did 2 years at Columbia, where I got my master's. Then went to Vanderbilt because, as great as Columbia was for me, in terms of being probably the most academically challenging environment I've ever been in, it's a big school and the computer science department there is very large. Vanderbilt kind of made me feel a little bit more like my undergraduate alma mater, Notre Dame. It was a little bit close. It was a little bit smaller. It was a little more focused on the individual. And I had a great opportunity to work with an advisor there, Gautam Biswas, who was doing a lot of fault detection work, which is finding errors in mechanical systems, preferably sooner before they break. That's prognostics, and diagnostics is figuring out what actually broke when it broke. And he was really interested in machine learning to do that, using data to kind of fill in the gaps, right? A lot of prognostic work is physics-based, right? We understand the tolerances of metal under a lot of heat. But in certain circumstances, you can't measure that because of how the system is built, or there's certain things that are very complex, and data helps us reduce some of those complexities. And that was a really exciting place for me to go work. And, that kind of pushed me into data mining more fully than I probably otherwise was going to follow. And at that point, I was pretty sure I was going to just become a professor. I thought I was going to be teaching students, advising students, probably going to conferences every now and then. That's kind of what it looked like.
So safe to say that if if that aged Daniel Mack was told you would have the title of assistant general manager for a Major League Baseball team at that point, I'm guessing you would have said no chance.
I'd have been pretty surprised, and I probably would also be pretty excited. That probably would have made my day.
So what was the tipping point? What changed, or what pushed you in this direction? I know that there was some activity related to cricket and algorithms. Tell me about that, and what was the tipping point that got you into baseball?
Yeah, so as I was finishing my dissertation, which was looking at trying to predict anomalies in aircraft takeoffs, and which was really complex data, right? It's 30 seconds of some really intense physical operation when you think about it, right? To achieve lift on large airplanes. One of the things my advisor was hoping for was to take my algorithms, take my models, and apply them to other data sets to show that it was general, right? That it wasn't just for this one particular application that my work would work for. That was when, kind of along that line, I had been collecting different data sets to play around with, potentially to maybe try and perform research on to get into conferences. One of those happened to be pitch by pitch data that Major League Baseball had. There is a very strong independent community that was collecting that data, that still collects that data, to do a lot of that research that, teams obviously weren't going to share. And there was a few websites, Baseball Prospectus, Fangraphs, and the like, that were getting very good at least publishing some of that research. And I was interested in that as well. And it dawned on me, why don't I try to use this data to show that my models work in another area? And it's because it's very different. And my advisor was interested, but at the same time, he had never been to a baseball game. And luckily I had participated because a lot of my friends were huge cricket fans at Vanderbilt. I learned a lot about that game, and there's obviously a ton of parallels and a lot of analogs to it. And so he and I would go back and forth, and I would explain the concept of an inning and to the concept of what's in cricket an over. Cricket's a lot like having pitch counts really mean something in the game, right? We treat pitch counts as sort of informal ways of knowing how much a pitcher has pitched in that game. In cricket, that's basically part of when a player stops pitching or needs to change. And so he and I kind of went back and forth on that, and it gave me an opportunity to use that data in my dissertation, which gave me an opportunity to then meet people in the independent sphere. And in 2012, baseball had its winter meetings in Nashville in the Biodome. I'm sure you've been there. The Opryland, huge, just 3 large domes that house all kinds of greenery. Major League Baseball does their winter meetings there every once in a while. Did it in 2012. Basically, by getting to meet some people in the independent community, I got tipped off that the Royals were getting ready to hire an analyst position, and it allowed me to apply for it. It allowed me to meet Mike Grootman, who was the director of the baseball analytics department at the time. I also got to meet John Williams, who was the assistant director of baseball analytics at the time. And both of those guys, took an interest in me. I took a great interest in both of them, and was very lucky to kind of go through that process and get hired as an analyst.
Yeah, both good guys, Mike and John. I mean, you know this. I generally see whoever is in that group year by year up in the lunchroom early in the game. It tends to be the time when a pregame host and sideline reporter has 5 to 10 minutes to just quickly slam some dinner and then run back and do that first report. By the way, a quick first inning means I'm eating in about 2 minutes. A long first inning, hopefully it happens when the Royals are batting, and putting up some runs actually gives me a chance to digest a little bit. But the game doesn't wait on us. It keeps moving. That's usually when I see Daniel and his crew. So you get the job with the Royals. You move to Kansas City. You know this well now. We all, and I've been here 12 years waiting on season number 13. For me personally, we take a lot of pride in the city. I say that now, considering myself a Kansas City and having been here for, I guess now officially a quarter of my life. But what were your impressions of Kansas City? What are your impressions of Kansas City now as you call this place home?
Yeah, one of the things that I think I've done in every place that I've moved is you always are going to compare it to where you recently came from. for me, when I went from South Bend, Indiana to New York City, that was a huge culture change. Probably a seismic level culture change for all kinds of reasons. Going from New York to Nashville, there was a lot of the things I liked about the metropolitan nature of New York City. Nashville was obviously a little smaller. It was much smaller in 2008 when I moved there than it is, over the last couple of years as it's become sort of the bachelorette capital of the world. But the piece of that was kind of always looking for things that I liked in every city and sort of taking it with me. The ability to walk to places, the opportunity for good shows to come through, kind of having enough growth amongst sort of a younger set that you could, new companies would want to take root there, that you would find sort of innovation happening. And I was very happy when I got to Kansas City and realized some of those things that I loved about Nashville had come with me, particularly the fact that there were things like an Alamo Draft House, and the opportunity to walk. I live downtown, being able to that as this area has grown, especially since 2013 even, right? This is a great place to be able to take a walk. And I can tell you from being in a pandemic, I walk down here a lot now, and it's truly awesome to be able to go all the way down to the crossroads and kind of walk around, or to go to the river market and kind of take in very different sights and understand very different things. The city's been great.
Let's talk a little bit about your role. And again, I mentioned before that analytics and roles involving computer science are so common now. Every single organization has it. They all, I suspect, do it a little bit differently, and you're all looking for that competitive edge. How wide ranging is the scope of what you do? Meaning, your day to day and your department's day to day, the focus, I know, is not just on the 25-man roster. And certainly when you look at a Dayton Moore and what all of his staff, and you fall under that, do, it's not just the 25 guys. It involves the minor leagues. It involves everything. How wide-ranging is it?
It's pretty broad. And I think we've continued to restructure and sort of reformat our department to better suit that broad directive that Dayton wants us to have. So like I said, we have 2 full-time analysts. One of them focuses on player development work. That's his main focus. The other one focuses on performance science, right, which is a new area for us over the last couple of years. Pravin Santhanam works very closely with Austin Driggers and John Waggle, and helps them understand the best ways to not just collect our data, but collect the data for our players, but store it, prepare it, perform research on it. And we've realized that we've had to do that in order to make sure that no one is pulled in any one direction too hard. But that being said, at the end of the day, both those analysts, Michael Fuentes, our director of pro scouting, like I said, who kind of works in our department, we're all going to kind of help each other out and do what we can to continue building in that way. But we all need to be very knowledgeable about lots of different things that are happening in our organization, whether it's who we prefer, who we like in the draft, to new technology that we have in player development and new reports, to what we're taking along those lines to help evaluate players for acquisition, whether it be into our minor league system or to our 25-man major league roster, 26-man, whatever it will be now.
Yeah, it's going to be more than 26, I think, right? And, I mean, based on everything that we're hearing, because they're going to need those reinforcements, especially if there's not a minor league season. That's a whole nother story. One of the things that's always impressed me about Dayton Moore, and I think most people that are watching and tuning in right now know about the kind of leader he is in the community. So if you've seen that in the community, you can imagine what that's like within the organization. He's always been a guy to me that listens to everyone. So, when he talked about hiring Mike Matheny, this wasn't just, let me hire Mike. This was listening to everybody that came into contact with him throughout the minor leagues and everywhere last year. He is someone that is going to take all those opinions, and then ultimately he's got to make a decision. So how much does that come into play with you guys? Dayton's background is on the baseball side and the scouting side, and he's got a massive staff doing that. He also has your staff. I know everything has to come together. So how important are all of those opinions from all aspects, including on your side?
I think he weights them in an incredibly egalitarian way, right? He wants to get a lot of opinions because he's very good at being able to hunt through and find new information in each opinion, which he can then use to sort of put together, sort of the decision that he wants us to either carry out, or the decision that he's going to make as it relates to any particular player or set of players. One of the things that we try to do with our department is make sure that we're building tools that can help him sort through a lot of that information, help other people in the organization as well sort through that information, so that it's not always necessary to ask a question that's one that we get a lot, right? We want to make some of that information easy to digest and easy to get to, so that anyone that sits in that position that has to ask those questions can get some of that immediate information. And then that makes the conversations that we have with Dayton much richer, because it's not like we're presenting world-changing information. We're presenting a really good nuanced perspective on that information that he can then take and, put it in perspective with pro scouting, with medical, with anything financial, all of those things that he has to put into his calculus. Our job is to make sure that it's put in a step-by-step way, so that he can digest it where he needs to digest it and ask questions where he needs to ask questions.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this as you're talking about it. It's fascinating because on my end, I've always felt like if we can't explain a stat quickly on TV, meaning if everyone doesn't understand it, then we've got to figure out a way to do more work, or maybe it takes a little time to start introducing it. For instance, OPS is not really that uncommon anymore, but I still think that there are a lot of traditionalists that know average, home runs, RBI. So when I use OPS, and I like to do that a lot, I'm going to explain OPS, on base plus slugging. Look, there's some people that might not even know what a good number for a slugging percentage or on base. So it's a process. You're obviously operating at a lot higher of a level than that. I would imagine that some of the conversations you have with your analysts and your staff, language-wise, terminology-wise, may be different than what you do with Dayton. With that said, Dayton and some of his top-level people are probably at a much different level today than where they were at 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So how critical is it to be able to make this very digestible? You touched on it a little bit there, so that they're understanding all the work you're doing.
Right. I would say that it started with Mike Rootman and John Williams, who did a great job at kind of laying down a foundation for us on how we wanted to present new information and present new ideas to the entire organization. And it revolved around transparency in what our models look like, being very transparent about how we get to certain things inside our models, but also being very upfront about the things that our models value or things that we value that might be in contrast to the pro scouting department or someone else inside the organization. And that means that you're constantly laying down foundational concepts everywhere, right? You can't just jump to the end and say, yeah, we have these 5 players in this order, and that's the way it is. Because first of all, you shouldn't do that to anybody. But if you want to be able to continue to reference why you have those 5 players in that spot, it's putting things in the right order. We value this characteristic amongst these types of hitters. We evaluate this sort of performance in these environments. We prefer players that can perform across our defensive and offensive players, for example, and being able to kind of lay that down in a pretty reasonable, rational way means that now when I say here are the 5 players that we really have interest in, I can break them down based off of that foundation. And the debate is more about, do those players fit that criterion, and less about, is that criterion valid? And that means that Dayton is actually getting different but valid perspectives from different people. And when they're in harmony, now you're really doing something great.
I think ultimately that's what you're looking for. My sense has always been that when you have that harmony, and you have from both sides, the scouting, or what I call the eyes side, and the analytics, the numbers side, when those come together and all match up, you have that confirmation, right? It's when they don't match up where you have to start figuring out why. And so, I mean, to me, that's fascinating. And I'm curious, how much have you seen? The thing that always bugged me, and it's still out there, is when you have, say, let's call it the old school scouts and say, well, they never played the game and they don't know. And then you got the newer school that say, well, you know, their eyes are deceiving them. They don't know. And it's like, wait a minute, we need to work together here to feed off of each other's expertise. How much have you dipped into that side of things, and vice versa? How much are you seeing, say, scouts learn the analytics? You know, how much are you seeing people from those two worlds learn each other's worlds?
Sure. The way I would say a lot of it has gone is, at the end of the day, we have a lot of people in our organization that want to make the right decision, right? They want to make the right decision for the organization, not a decision that validates their personal worldview or a specific way in which they want to see baseball work. They want to get the best players into our organization because we want to win. And what I've discovered in my time here is it has caused me a great deal of introspection every year, where I get to think back on players that I've missed on, because that happens, players that I got wrong. But at the same time, I know that pro scouts and amateur scouts do this all the time. Also think about the one that got away, or the player that they overvalued. And what that means is we're constantly challenging each other, but we're asking those questions about why we missed it. What can we do to get better? If I came in 2013 and thought I had it all figured out, I don't think I would have lasted very long. I think Mike and John would have set me on the curb. It was about trying to figure out what can we continue to add so that we can continue to get better and continue to get an edge. And in my conversations with our scouts, that's the same vibe I get back. They want to also get an edge, which means they want to learn about new technology. They want to understand why I see players that way and why others in my department see players that way, so that we can actually kind of get to that full point where now it's two players kind of enter that metaphorical Thunderdome, right? One of them's going to leave, but we're going to now be able to kind of talk on a similar level, because we both want to make sure that the best player is the one that exits that we get out of that, rather.
Let's talk a little bit about data collection, analysis. I think that there are a lot of fans that sit at home that love to live on a Fangraphs or a Baseball Reference. You mentioned those. Those are certainly tools that I use. You have so much more, and I know that you look at those too, but you have so much more at your fingertips. We're obviously not going to give away anything proprietary here, and what you guys do might be different than other teams, and you all work very hard at that every single day to utilize and leverage that. How do you go about collecting data? What are you looking for beyond what the average person like me sees?
So our data collection mechanisms are fairly vast, right? We're pulling from a lot of different vendors. I think the best place to start is we have radars in every one of our parks. We currently are with TrackMan. They capture every pitch. They measure every pitch. They measure the velocity, the spin rates, how the pitch moves, where it ended up. It also measures things from the hitting side for us, right? Exit velocities and launch angles. The other piece that happens along with that is the thing that's been in baseball for a really long time, which is play-by-play. So we can attach outcomes to a lot of those different types of pitches and a lot of those different types of batted balls. And when we do that, we are able to construct a great deal we're able to construct from that a great deal of inferred knowledge about what players are the most successful in certain environments, and which players may have raw resources that we still see upside in, where we can find an undervalued player that can make the Royals better. Obviously, we're using a very strong database backend for that. We're doing a lot of our research and analysis in a couple of different programming languages, R and Python. We're, utilizing parallel computing where we can, when the data is just annoyingly large enough that it needs some extra love and care. But the base of it starts with sort of that pitch by pitch mechanism. And now with StatCast and Hawkeye, StatCast since 2015, Hawkeye is going to hopefully take that over. We've been able to expand that over the last couple of years to not just now pitch by pitch information, but knowing where the players are on the field in a major league game at any one time, where the ball is in any one time, and kind of using that to help understand what players make, and you see this on broadcast. Major League Baseball presents their versions of it, right? Route efficiencies, who's the best fielders, outfielders, infielders, and, catchers that are the best at throwing out runners are the best at stealing bases. We kind of gone from pitch by pitch to that whole player tracking, the play record, and extract and kind of understand and infer knowledge about players from that.
How unique is it too, in terms of players? And certainly, managers, coaching staff, they're all going to, for the most part, they're all going to be, let's say, age-wise between their 40s and their 60s. I'm going a little bit broad there, but none of them played or came up in the game when this stuff was available, so they have to adjust. If you look right now, and I think this is true not just for analytics, this is true for all types of aspects, not just in baseball, but any office place. It's that generational, millennials versus Gen Xers, and they have different needs. They see things differently. That's a whole nother discussion. But if you look at, say, an Alex Gordon and maybe the way he came up, none of this was there. Now you look at, say, a Nicky Lopez or even a Hunter Dozier or any of the sort of next wave of Royals, they're coming up, I'm guessing, with an understanding of this stuff or an expectation that it's going to be there for them when they get to the major leagues as tools that they've heard about. How different are those gaps in terms of the veteran players, the young players, and what their needs are?
There's definitely a gap, and a lot of it comes down to sort of institutional culture. And I think institutional culture kind of means all of baseball as well. One of the best parts about this game, right, is it operates on very different time scales, right? We've got the game, we've got a season, we've got careers, everything's kind of happening in larger and larger time scales. And when you watch the changes that the game has undergone probably over the last 10 years as it relates to technology, you see that has started at a younger and younger age, including before they even become professional baseball players. And I think amateur players, whether they work with an individual coach or a college team, they're exposed to this, and then they come to us, and it's incumbent upon us to be able to provide them with those similar resources. And then coaches and players get to make that decision on how they interact with that. And we're great with that outcome. But what we see is, as you get to the major league level, as you get to the veterans, right, that's more of a, they're going to be even more picky about which pieces they want because they've had success. And once again, it's about just making sure that those resources are available to all of our players, and then allowing our major league coaches or, and our major league players the opportunity to engage with that data and engage with those tools if they want them. And if they've had success and don't feel that they need them, we're okay with that too. We just want to make sure we're not depriving them of that information.
I know Ryan's going to jump in shortly with some questions. I've got 3 more if we can squeeze them in, and Ryan, cut us off certainly if you need to do that. You talked about, coaches, managers. I was really intrigued to hear Mike Matheny at his introductory press conference. I think that was back in November, again, feels like years ago, when he was introduced as the new manager, saying that he had gone, I think, to an analytics school. I'm wondering how much that helps, and what are kind of the common questions that you in your role might get from a manager or a coaching staff?
I do think that I've seen more managers taking and coaches in general taking some of those courses through third parties, and always what they get out of it is a better understanding of a lot of the jargon, right? Which kind of goes back to probably earlier on, right? If you're trying to lay that foundation, you're trying to strip away as much of that jargon as possible. But gaining confidence with some of that newer jargon that you can't quite get away from would be is tremendous. And I think it helps coaches get past certain items that once they get past that, they realize they already kind of intuitively had a feel for that statistic or that concept, but there was just a lot of verbiage between comprehension and question. One of the things that we've gotten a lot of over time is we help a lot in the advanced process. So for what I mean by the advanced process, right, is before every series at the major league level, our major league coaching staff has reports, both in person as well as analytic reports, that help describe what our opponent does, how they respond in certain situations, where they're weak, where they're strong, so that a good game plan can be made. A good place where you see a lot of interaction between coaches and and research and development is in that kind of data, because we're always trying to look and find an edge there. And we're also trying to look and find ways of making those tools easier to absorb for players so that the preparation happens as efficiently as it possibly can.
It's interesting and then constantly evolving, of course. My final two, first off, where do you see, and I know you may not have the exact answer to this, but where do you see all this, your world in general, going in the next 5, 10, 20 years? Nothing ever stays the same. Shoot, I don't even know what it's going to look like post-pandemic, but how much different will the world of analytics be in terms of baseball, say 10 years down the road?
Well, I think if we try and follow the trend a little bit from sort of a macro level, it's always about trying to get to things that are closer to the process that a player goes through when they make a play, whether it's deciding to swing the bat, how they throw a ball if they're a pitcher, how they throw the ball if they're a fielder, what kind of routes they take in the outfield. Everything's been trying to get a little bit closer to the decision-making moment. And as Dayton has added folks like Ryan Maid, who's our director of behavioral science, we've been continuing to ask ourselves those questions. Can we look at data that tells us a little bit more about the mental aspect of the player's decision-making matrix, right? We know, then we start to go from, okay, this happened in a game, but now what are the sort of decisions that they make mentally? How are they physically prepared to capitalize on those decisions? That's a performance science aspect of things. And and then how does skill tie into all of that? We are basically trying to continue to mine down to fundamental aspects of how those players play the game. And I think people in my position are constantly trying to find those players who have those traits earlier on, or find players who have those traits but maybe missing a piece here or there that an organization can help with in the minor leagues. And thus you can find really, really fascinating athletes who maybe look crude but have all of the tools necessary to become a great baseball player. And our organization wants to position itself to be able to find and help those players get to the big leagues. That's how we can be the best Royals team possible.
So interesting and constantly, as I said before, evolving. My final question, and then I know Ryan's got a bunch, and I see 64 participants in here right now, which is awesome. We appreciate everybody visiting with us here today as we are hopefully getting closer to the baseball season. But Daniel, I'm sure a lot of younger people or younger people's parents say to you, hey, how can my son or how can my daughter or how can I get into this? I get it all the time from broadcasting. And I also understand a lot of people would like to be where you're at or where I'm at today. It doesn't happen overnight. The advice I often give to young broadcasters is do everything. You know, it doesn't have to be baseball. It could be a sport that doesn't get any attention. Repetitions are important. Access, exposure, all of that over and over and over again. People say to me all the time, do you get nervous on TV? And I say, no. Do you get nervous going to your job? Why? Because I've done this thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Keep learning every day, but it's routine. How does a young person embark on a career of being the next Dr. Daniel Mack?
Well, I think that it starts with being able and being very excited to read information that's come out of the independent community as it relates to baseball research and baseball fandom, because understanding that perspective of evaluating players is tremendous. Understanding what data is going into that is also tremendous, but you build upon sort of that general pop science interest by then being able to go and, you know, start learning programming languages, whether it be R or Python, to be able to manipulate data, to be able to understand relationships in data that may not necessarily even start with baseball, but you can take that knowledge and begin to transfer it over. And then at the end of the day, I think getting comfortable with those tools and then having a lack of fear of failure so that you can be creative, right? We just talked about my dissertation. It wasn't an A to B, and it never, and for most people it never will be. For those that it is, I'm truly astonished. But for everyone else, it's A to B to C to D to E, and you don't know how long you're going to stay in between those parts. But the only way to get to the end goal, to be able to acquire that knowledge, is to make a lot of mistakes and do a lot of data analysis where you're constantly asking questions and validating against what's been out there already. So it's kind of building some tool sets and sort of kind of unleashing creativity with the data and kind of just digging into it.
There we go. Ryan's popped into the screen.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys. This has been very interesting. And thank you to all of our participants as well for throwing in some great questions here. Some things we may be able to go through pretty quickly, but I don't want to have a huge debate over this. But Liam Conway has asked, what is the best college for baseball? Is it opinions? I think Kansas State University's got a great baseball program personally, but
I can at least add my 2 cents in, because, we always like to brag about our schools.
Yeah.
But the University of Wisconsin got rid of their baseball program right around when I got there as a freshman. So I know it's not my school. I do know that where Daniel got his PhD is the cream of the crop right now in terms of Vanderbilt.
I think there's quite a few schools that could probably fit into that category. Clearly, Vanderbilt's had a lot of success, especially over the last 10 to 15 years with Coach Corbin, and produced a lot of big leaguers. My alma mater, Notre Dame, has produced more than a couple as well. AJ Pollock probably being the last truly great player, but a few of those other ones, Trey Mancini, who's been with the Orioles. One of the things that's fascinating to pay attention to, and our work lets us do that, is we can kind of see the ebb and flow of college baseball around different teams.
Interesting. So you kind of answered this, but maybe just go a 1 degree further into how you're tracking all the data. You mentioned that at a high level, and there's another question kind of on this same track. Is it manual, or do you have those computer systems? Would you mind maybe even talking about those tools specifically, or if you're building it all manually, just in case somebody wants to start downloading some of those tools and playing in their spare time or using them in the business world?
Yeah, we try to use a lot of open source technology. So MySQL backbone's kind of been part of who we've been since I've been here. Like I said, R is probably the workhorse language for us, because it allows you to very quickly get to a lot of data insights, in sort of a computer to programmer fashion. Python is one we use when we need to kind of begin to really dig into larger data sets. But we also use Python to help power some of our front end things as well. So, we definitely are very conscious about the tools we create. From R, when we need to create a quick report, we might use something like R Markdown that allows us to sort of mix R with a little bit of web design. And then, a lot of our front end stuff, there's Django with Python, and then, a lot of JavaScript front end components there to kind of build out some of the other web pieces that we utilize internally.
Yeah, and Kevin Rupert's question is very similar to that, just a little bit further. He asked, what other business intelligence tools you have at your disposal besides R and Python? He said maybe those are not particularly user-friendly for communicating insight. And he asked because he's a Tableau user and a developer and an admin for Tableau. So any other of those BI tools that you have at your disposal, whether you're using them actively or not?
We have played around with Tableau a little bit. I think because of some of the decisions we made a little bit earlier on, it hasn't been as easy of a addition to us. But I do know that in Major League Baseball, Tableau is a very powerful tool for a number of organizations, especially in terms of like quickly prototyping reports of certain types, so that other people can look at those reports and do some immediate filtering and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess just a personal question for me. I'm curious. So if you see a tool out there and you want to use it, do you just go buy it, or is that an approval process? Or I'm sure the team is saying, Daniel, whatever you need to be successful, we'll get it for you.
The organization's always been very open to our exploration of new technologies. There is an approval process. A lot of times, because we're still a relatively small group, there's a certain aspect of adding a tool, adds overhead to learn the tool, takes away from opportunity for us to continue growing in another area. So sometimes we have to make hard decisions about whether or not to pursue a particular new paradigm versus just going down a path that we know is currently working.
And I anticipated getting this question or a question like this about a specific scenario. So I want to preface that Daniel, you do not have to answer this if you're not allowed. Please do not get any trouble with the team or Major League Baseball. But Chris has a good question about how much real-time data is shared with players, maybe coaches during the game. And does that help them make any adjustments and planning in real time? And any stories you could share of how data and in-time game adjustments have impacted the game. And there's one specific scenario he mentions, and we're all thinking about it. It's have you ever run the probability of Gordon scoring the tying run in the 9th inning of the Game 7 2014 World Series?
Well, the questions actually can be answered fairly easily. Major League Baseball takes that out of our hands.
Okay.
Major League Baseball does not allow us to communicate any information electronically to the dugout once the game starts. As a matter of fact, the iPads that the coaching staffs of all 30 clubs have used to replace some of the large paper binders, those things get locked down by a lot of software that Major League Baseball has developed over time to try and help make sure that line is kept very clean. And so, we're always there to help prepare the coaching staff and the players prior to a series. And we're happy to help them sort of perform the deconstruction of that afterwards. But everything that happens in the middle, what makes the game kind of great is it's those guys in the dugout. They're the ones that have to make it happen. So that's part of it.
About technology impacting their real-time decisions. We can just throw that out. It's not possible.
So yep. There's no way that Gordon scores, but maybe the numbers say otherwise. I don't know, Daniel.
Even if I wanted to look at that, I'm not sure that I would. I just don't want to know. I'm happier living in a state of ignorance on that play.
Yeah, it's in the past. Let's hope it gets to the point where we can do that again.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll reevaluate that at a future time where we're sending somebody home to win a World Series.
There we go. Exactly.
A couple other tech-related questions, and we probably marked some of these, or probably talked about these a little bit, but have you ever looked at Hadoop or other database types? You already mentioned some of your favorite tools, but what about Hadoop, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been very interested to try and incorporate parallel computing when it's been necessary. Where I finished my PhD was a little bit before I think the term big data became in vogue. And so I always used to like to say, for me, a lot of the data sets were either just inconsequentially small, and so they didn't need it, or they were just annoyingly large, where once again, the overhead to get myself into a position to write MapReduce type algorithms that would utilize Hadoop really weren't going to help me in my moment as a graduate student. And I would say that as it relates to baseball, that data still can be managed in ways where it's not super necessary to go in that direction. That being said, I think if we oriented ourselves to learning that kind of that kind of paradigm to help us with using Hadoop and making MapReduce algorithms out of a number of our models, we might be able to uncover more information. But once again, it's a time constraint kind of problem.
Yeah, I think everyone making those decisions considers those same variables. You probably answered this, but let's just re-answer it here. How many total analytics staff work for the organization? And then how old is the analytics group? You mentioned kind of early 2010s, right?
Yeah, Mike Grootman and John Williams were inside the organization right around 2010. I don't know exactly when Mike started, so hopefully he won't hold that against me that I can't recall his personal history, but right around 2010. And currently, I would say our organization has, I hate that I have to do the math on the fly there, but There's essentially 7 of us that are full-time analytics staff, plus an intern, plus, like I said, our director of pro scouting moonlights in our department still, because he came from baseball. He came from our analytics group.
Got it. Thanks. Maybe just a little bit more detail here from Nick's question here. From a data analyst perspective, how does the show help or hinder players day-to-day in their batting and their defense, if any?
I'm assuming by the show he means the video game, or does he mean the Major League Baseball?
Not sure about the show.
I would say that if it's the video game, I think there's a lot of research currently into what kind of mental training players can be given to help them make better decisions that can help train that part of their brain. Like I said, Ryan Maid, who's our director of behavioral science, really digs into this about what it means to have mental plasticity. I think one of the pieces of research that we've come across a lot is that, especially in very specific skill-oriented sets, baseball is one of them, but they exist everywhere. Mental plasticity, if you're going to train for it, you have to train for it very specifically. And so something like a video game like the show might be a very low-level version of that. But there's a lot of vendors that are trying to interact in that space about how to train players to understand pitch types and routes, how to break off of a ball off the bat and things like that.
A little bit embarrassed to not know what the show is. He was referring to the video game. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I figured out what the show was. Yeah. Awesome. Cool.
Okay. One last tech question, and then maybe some more about you personally. So, what kind of computer infrastructure do you use? Are you using on-premises or a data center or cloud? Windows, Linux, AIX based.
Yeah, it's predominantly Linux. The organization I know has a lot of agreements with Microsoft. So a lot of personnel in baseball operations use Surfaces and things of that nature. I have come from a fairly strong Apple background and thus fell right into the OS 10 Linux. I know OS 10 isn't Linux, but that version of Unix in that space. And we have some on-site data storage, and then we have some off-site data storage that we kind of use for different tools.
Great. Okay, some more about you personally. So where did you grow up, and did you have a team that you rooted for as a child?
Yeah, I grew up in Reno, Nevada. And so the two teams that were the closest to me were the Giants and the Athletics. I, however, kind of got to learn at an early age what it meant to follow a team versus following a player. So Matt Williams was a third baseman for the San Francisco Giants when I was a kid. He actually grew up in Carson City. I think he played at UNLV. So he was kind of a hometown hero. And I followed him. And when the Giants traded him to the Indians, I realized that I probably shouldn't be following a team. And so I just kind of followed him for the rest of his career. So I was an Indians fan for a couple of years, and then I was a Diamondbacks fan for a couple of years. And, my senior year was the year the Diamondbacks beat the Yankees in 2001. And that was until my career, probably my fondest memory in baseball. And then luckily I've had a couple that easily beat that.
I believe too. I thought I read the other day that Matt Williams is about to make his managerial debut over in Korea, or he's about to become a manager in the Korean Baseball League, which is about to open up.
Yeah, and he managed for the Nationals for a couple of years, and yeah, I mean he's had a pretty successful post-playing career. But the only thing I'll say about Matt Williams, if you go back and look, there was a chance he would have broken Roger Maris's home run record in the early '90s if it hadn't been for the strike.
Wow. Your knowledge of those individual players reminds me why I no longer play fantasy baseball. Okay, what was your undergraduate degree in, real quick? We got
computer science.
Where'd you go to undergrad? Right? Oh, Notre Dame. You mentioned that.
Notre Dame.
Yep.
So undergrad in computer science. Great. I think we got kind of running out of time here. Any other suggestions on data visualization tools that you use or you would recommend using for those in the industry that have those roles?
Right. So things that kind of come to my mind, if you've gotten comfortable with our ggplot2 And a lot of the things that are in that, what they call the tidyverse, have become very popular and produce a lot of very common, very easy to understand visualizations. As with anything, what we've learned is even if they are easy to understand, you can always present data in easy to understand ways that is not easy to understand. But that's one of those ones that I think we go back to with a decent amount of frequency, because it allows us to produce some really consistent looking pieces of information for baseball operations staff and coaches.
Good advice. Okay, last question to confirm. Spring training part 2 starts June 12th. The regular season begins July 1. Is that true?
You know what? I've been in enough I've listened to Dayton and Scott talk enough to know that that is definitely above my pay grade.
Yeah.
And I think Major League Baseball just wants to be able to find a way for us to get back to games, and I hope we can do it in a safe and stable way.
I'll take a quick stab to say, based on a conversation I had with Whit Merrifield last week on a baseball podcast. I'm doing a national baseball podcast, and Whit said a couple of things that I think would serve everyone well here, all of us that aren't privy to the inside information. He said, when you see all these reports coming out, there was a report about everybody's going to play in Arizona, and then it's Arizona and Florida, and then it's maybe, he said, take all of these reports as just ideas, that none of this is finalized. Think about any time these reports come out, maybe they're leaked intentionally, maybe they're not, maybe somebody has connections, maybe not, that they're kicking around all of this stuff. The one thing that I think that I've sensed from just talking to different people is whenever, and if there's a start date, I'm not aware of it yet. I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, I keep thinking late June, early July seems to make sense, but I think that there's still some hurdles they have to come over. I hope I'm not talking out of turn here. I'm trying to read the tea leaves a little bit, but yeah. Players generally tell me you're probably looking at 3 weeks to get ready, 2 at the minimum, 3, probably pitchers might need 3 weeks. So wherever that start is, and figure there's a good chance we could go up towards maybe Thanksgiving, maybe, but we need to wait on an announcement here.
Yeah, I saw Salvi's Insta story today showing his workout and all the various things he's doing. So maybe that's inspiring some confidence that they're getting ready. Hey, I've learned a lot here, and I really want to thank both of you for taking the time to do this. It's definitely going to change my perspective as I'm watching the game and learning about how these decisions are being made. It's been really great to kind of scratch that baseball itch right now, and just can't thank you guys enough. And I want to thank all of you who participated today and joined and participated for the whole hour. Thank you. And I want to let you guys get back to your day, and appreciate again taking the time. And Joel, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. I know there were a bunch of birthday messages on there, so I appreciate that. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about like batting average versus OPS plus or anything like that, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Whole nother time. Yeah.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Daniel, appreciate it. Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys.